Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il sat down with his Japanese and Chinese counterparts in Tokyo this past Saturday for talks aimed at advancing the trilateral partnership amid mounting uncertainty over U.S. trade and security policies. We have more on Press Perspective today. Hope your work week is off to a good start. It's Monday, March 24th here in Seoul, and you're watching Press Perspective. Today, we touch upon diplomacy here in this part of the world and beyond amid efforts to ensure regional stability amid growing uncertainty over global matters. For this, I have Chloe Borgnon with French broadcaster France 24 here in the studio. Chloe, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's been. Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Chung Ku-youn at Kangwon National University live on the line. Professor Chung, it's a pleasure.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Right, we'll start here in the studio. Chloe, let's begin with details of the trilateral talks among foreign ministers of Seoul, Tokyo and Beijing over in Japan this past Saturday. What was addressed and what do you suppose makes this latest gathering very significant?
Yeah, so what we know of the main takeouts is the main thing that was said is the peace on the Korean Peninsula is a shared responsibility for the three countries. It was said by the foreign minister of South Korea on a press briefing right after it. And it was said that it was at the same time a shared interest and the responsibility of the three countries together to make sure that the peace is implemented here in the peninsula and is kept. They were also pledging to promote further cooperation in all areas, so try to develop this trilateral cooperation and discussions. They were also speaking about other topics maybe that would seem less like the main point of interest, but are still interesting to see. So on Ukraine, the foreign minister of Japan said that there would be that any attempt to unilaterally change the status quo by force would not be accepted anywhere. So that was, direct blow in the direction of Russia, but also of the United States. They also spoke about climate change and aging population. And interesting to see because, the three countries all seeing the same kind of problems and could help each other and cooperate to try to raise better solutions together. Regarding what can make it significant, first of all, all the three participants have been taking a stance on North Korea. So that's quite logical and a stronger blow, obviously, from Japan and South Korea. But, even China, who is one of the biggest ally of North Korea, has been taking position, especially on the peace in the peninsula, but they have been taking a stance as well, even if it was a warmer one, obviously. So that's interesting to see. And then it's always an important point when the three neighboring countries, they are not always working together. There have been political and historical divide, and they've been deciding to work together in a time where tensions are rising everywhere in the world. Wars are getting stronger and stronger, and we can see that with Donald Trump coming back to the US, tensions have been rising. It's interesting to see that the choice is made here by the allies, like the three countries, to ally and to partner up against these tensions. So that will be, I would say, the main point to take back from here.
Right, and keeping in mind what Chloe has just said, Professor Chung, what do you suppose are the merits of this three-way partnership, keeping in mind, of course, the current geopolitical landscape, and how can it be productively nurtured?
Well, it is very sensible to have this dialogue between South Korea, China, and Japan, considering their geographical proximity. We are very close to one another. But at the same time, it is also true that three countries find it very difficult to build a stronger relationship because of historical disputes, geopolitical conflict, and economic coercions. While Japan and South Korea maintain a strategic cooperation with the United States through trilateral cooperation, but it is also true that we cannot completely decouple from China. So maintaining stable economic relationship with China is crucial for both South Korea and Japan. And especially, as you mentioned, and as Chloe mentioned, especially in the response of Trump administration's disregard for rule-based order, it is important for the other countries to maintain the multilateral economic system And also cooperation such as like a people-to-people exchange, climate change is possible. And also more than anything, we can cooperate over the stability of the Korean Peninsula, especially how we can make North Korea more responsible for their behavior. That's a thing that three countries can actually cooperate and having the same voices over North Korea.
Right, to ensure regional stability, of course. Chloe, during a separate meeting on the margins of the trilateral talks, Foreign Minister Cho Tae-il sat down with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi to talk about prospects of Chinese President Xi Jinping attending the APEC summit here in South Korea later this year. What do you suppose are the prospects of President Xi Jinping visiting South Korea?
Yeah, so Minister Cho, so the foreign minister of South Korea, said that they were working together to ensure that President Xi Jinping could visit the country at the occasion of the APEC summit. So it could be seen as a new turning point in bilateral relationships. So the APEC summit will take place this year, late October or November. And if Xi Jinping were to come, because he's been like kind of eating about it for a few months now. It will be the first time he visits South Korea in 11 years. And it's true that the two countries, China and South Korea, have been developing bilateral relationship for quite a few months now, with quite big announcements that have been made about the tourist visa on both sides, also about China, who could possibly lift restrictions on South Korean cultural content and everything on this K-cultures wave. So it would be interesting to see how it could go, also because I mean, they both want peace and stability in the area. They are both key economic partners, and there have been some discussions that have to be had, like even more difficult ones. Like recently in the Yellow Sea, there were a standoff between South Korean authorities that tried to come and inspect a new steel structure built by China, but Chinese authorities did not allow them to come. So, I mean, the two countries do need to be able to have like healthy relationship. If Xi Jinping were to come, what would be developed, what would be made? I read an article by South China Morning Post who were saying that for China, they were speaking on this perspective, they say they would like to step up their economical cooperation game in the area, and they would probably be really interested this year in a free trade agreement with Japan, Korea, and China, so making a new kind of bubble, economic bubble here. Also, it's interesting to see that South Korea is already one of the only developed countries who has a fair trade agreement with China. And it can be seen in numbers because South Korea is China's second largest trading partner after the US. And it's been getting better and better because last year bilateral trade was raising at 5.6% on a year. So that's the thing we can see. Commerce, like economic ties, would probably be the strongest point between the two countries here.
Right, the economy, it's a mutual interest between South Korea and China, of course. Professor Chung, with regard to the upcoming APEC summit, pundits here believe that this gathering will prove to be pivotal for South Korea as it seeks to return to the global platform following its political turmoil. Do you agree? And if that is the case, how can South Korea make this latest event matter even more?
Well, actually, in addition to APEC summit, there are many actually large-scale multilateral summits are expected to place in the second half of this year. APEC summit, of course, which will be held in South Korea, but also South Korea will assume a chairmanship in the UN Security Council. So there will be a kind of big event in the New York as well. So South Korea has many opportunities and venues from which it can signal the rest of the world that it is actually returning to the workplaces. And as you know, during these several weeks and several months, South Korea has been bypassed by many diplomatic high-ranking officials, especially United States, which is which was actually crucial for South Korea because not only because there is a new administration in the United States, but also there are many actually issues that we have to coordinate with the United States, not only about foreign affairs, but also diplomacy and security and emerging technology and also supply chain issues. There are so many issues, but that has been very bypassed, not only for the United States, but also other countries. So having these events will signal that South Korea is returning to the world places, and we are going to assume our role, which might be different role depending on the domestic circumstances. But at the same time, it is very crucial that South Korea will return the places, and at the same time, we're going to have a kind of hold a kind of big meeting where United States and Chinese leaders will join together, which will set the tone for the rest of the 3 or 4 years after, and how the world order will actually take shape. So in that sense, South Korea's role is very important for the next several months.
Right, and as South Korea looks to expand its role in the global stage, Chloe, Mr. Trump appears to be retreating from the global stage. Now, there's been talk about the U.S. possibly surrendering its military command of NATO. What more can you tell us about this development?
Yeah, so from the European point of view, Europeans are kind of holding their breath on this because we can see a few instances. The position between NATO and the US is kind of starting to divide. First of all, let's take a few examples, but the position of NATO on Ukraine is Russia is in the wrong. The position of Donald Trump on the war in Ukraine is kind of, we can see, changing at the recent time, and is kind of getting further and further apart from Russia is in the wrong. Then obviously, there's this America's first policy where it's hard to see the US coming to help in any other conflict at the moment if they keep on this kind of policy. And Donald Trump has been saying it quite a few times already. He wants European countries to pay for their own defense. So that's something that was supposed to happen. All the countries were supposed to raise their budget for defense. It did not really happen. I mean, COVID was there, inflation was there, so most of the countries have not been raising up as much as the US would like to. And we've seen that, like in February, G.D. Vance and the US Minister of Defense both called Europeans to take care of their own defense. The Minister of Defense even said something in the lines of, the US won't always be there to help them. So that's kind of the thing that's been scaring a little bit the Europeans on this. So future of NATO is kind of unsure. I mean, this is a company, not a company, but an organization that's been made after World War II in 1949. The aim was at the time to make sure that the Soviet Empire was not rising in the time of Cold War. And then they've been moving toward mostly peacekeeping all over the world. And right now we can see that what would NATO be without the US? And most of the experts are saying they would lose a lot of credibility, and especially from the strength of the US Army, but also the power of the US nuclear weapons. I mean, some of the countries, France, between them, have their own nuclear weapons, but there are not as many, there's not as much as the power that the US have currently all over the world. So that's the question. What we can see is right now, Europeans are kind of developing on two sides. First of all, trying to keep NATO and trying to keep the US into NATO. And on the other side, they're trying to develop their own European defense in case, just in case, the US would not be any more reliable on this point. But that's kind of a wait-and-see situation for now.
Right. And amid this uncertainty over the fate of NATO, Professor Chung, should South Korea be worried about a possible withdrawal of American soldiers stationed here in the country?
Well, I don't think that is very extreme situations. And I don't think that kind of situation like withdrawal U.S. forces from South Korea will occur. Although President Trump and his advisors and many officials have made such comments in the past, especially during the campaign trail last year. But if the United States prioritizes U.S.-China competition as its strategic objective, it cannot overlook South Korea's strategic and geopolitical importance, not only the location, but also the military forces it actually bears in actually as a role of deterrent against any types of contingency in the regions. especially when United States are really concerned about hotspots or potential dispute along the first island chain, which cross South Korea, Japan, and Philippines, then South Korea's role in these cases will be very crucial. But as Chloe mentions, it is certain that both South Korea and Japan will call upon to strengthen their conventional deterrence capability for the stability of the Western Pacific. In this regard, I think existing trilateral cooperation between South Korea, Japan, and United States, and the framework like Quad and AUKUS will be likely to be utilized by Trump administration. Although there might be different purposes and different specific use, but these types of minilaterals will be utilized as a way of deterring China's kind of provocative behavior in the region.
Right, I see. Staying with security, but moving beyond this particular region. Chloe, earlier you mentioned Ukraine. Now, officials from Ukraine, the U.S. held technical talks this past Sunday ahead of the official talks between the U.S. and Ukraine and between the U.S. and Russia set to take place in Saudi Arabia on this Monday. What can we expect from those talks?
It's kind of hard to know for now because what they want to speak about is mostly a ceasefire, limited ceasefire. But the question is, what would be included in the ceasefire when we've seen already, like it's been started with the US as mediator in the middle of the two countries. They were supposed to be the ceasefire. So the US, for example, would like it to be covering energy and infrastructure. Russia would like it to cover only energy's infrastructure, so a way smaller part. And Ukraine would like it to cover everything above and also the ports and railroads. So we can see that obviously every country has a different position. There is also the question on when would that start. I mean, there were discussions last week between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. At the end of the talk, it looked like Russia was ready to apply the ceasefire immediately. But in the end, according to Ukraine, they were like drones that attacked civilian infrastructure. So it's hard to know if they were onto energy infrastructures or not. But that's what we can see. And then Russia has been accusing Ukraine to also send drones, even though this attack was before the official signature of the ceasefire. So that's probably what would have to be discussed now with the US, because they're both talking only to the US right now. It would be when to implement it, what to implement. And it has to be a strong question, like a strong position, because Ukraine has already said that they do not trust Russia to follow a ceasefire. There is no more leverage because, I mean, economical sanctions have been taken by the other countries against Russia. It has not stopped them. So the question is, what would make Russia, follow the truce or the ceasefire? And on the other side, according to some experts, there is the risk that Russia might use any attack from Ukraine to say that they are breaking the ceasefire and to put pressure on the US to make sure that they stop helping Ukraine. So that's the point of view of some experts that would be maybe the main risk. So, and then what about long-term peace? The thing is, the things that Russia is asking for before even talking about long-term peace is a no-go for Ukraine and even for some of the European allies. So the situation is going to stay, I think, complicated for quite a long time. But we'll need to see what happens in Saudi Arabia and what can come out of those talks.
All right, those talks set to take place in Saudi Arabia starting today. Professor Chung, against this backdrop, North Korea's Kim Jong-un has expressed his unwavering support for Russian aggression against Ukraine during talks with top Russian security official Sergei Shoigu last week over in Pyongyang. What are your takeaways from those talks?
Well, for North Korea, maintaining strategic alignment with Russia at this moment is very important for strengthening its leverage against the United States, South Korea, and even China. The United States, especially Trump administration, was actually very in a hasty manner pushed the ceasefire negotiation with Russian-Ukraine war, which seems to have already lost the initiative in the negotiation. Also, Trump administration pursued a retrenchment foreign policy and seeking a reset in relation with Russia made this outcome inevitable, I think. And as a result, Russia actually achieved most of what it actually supposed to want to, like gain benefit such as no concession the restoration of U.S. relations, sanction relief, and possibly escape from diplomatic isolation. That kind of things might be pursued during the negotiations. And United States, in its attempt to kind of manage it, kind of mediate the crisis in the Ukraine theaters, they can just hastily kind of end the term in the kind of peace talk. So in that context, North Korea stands to benefit from strengthening its alignment to Russia to bolster its leverage against the United States and South Korea. This is particularly true considering that it was President Trump who actually declared the interest in the U.S.-North Korea talk. And currently, North Korea has no incentive to initiate talks, and by strengthening its relationship with Russia and potentially China in the later hours, reinforcing this North Korea or China or Russia trilateral alignment, North Korea can increase its leverage against the United States and South Korea. So this could potentially give a huge advantage in any future inter-Korean and U.S.-North Korea dialogue. So North Korea, for the time being, will show us a very close relationship with Russia in any types of setting.
Right, and while North Korea shares its support for Russia, France and the UK, Chloe, have spoken about boots on the ground in Ukraine in the form of peacekeeping troops. What's the latest on that front?
Yeah, so that's nothing new. I mean, we've also been discussing it together here. So it's been around since early 2024. French President Emmanuel Macron was saying that he refused to rule out the idea of sending troops to Ukraine after, once the truce is implemented, so after the war. At the time, most of the allies, most of the other countries were absolutely against the idea, but we've seen that it's been gaining momentum. And right now, there were talks last week in the United Kingdom with 31 countries that have been discussing what could happen or it could be implemented. Because what they say is it needs to be discussed and to be decided before there is a ceasefire, because once the ceasefire is on, the troops have to be able to come onto the ground in Ukraine immediately to make sure that they are able to be peacekeepers. It's interesting to note that Russia has been saying that they are absolutely against having NATO troops in Ukraine as peacekeepers, so that means that the Europeans have to come with another solution. So that's why France and England or the United Kingdom are both like at the head of the spear on this situation. They are trying to find ways. It's kind of still hard at the moment. The discussion is where should they be? Probably not on the front line, nowhere near the places that could be more still in tension. It's definitely not happening if there is still conflict going on. But the other question is also how many troops should be sent. They are staying quite vague in this. They are saying between 10,000 and 30,000. Would that be enough? Some experts are saying that it probably won't be enough to kind of be a deterrent for Russia. And then also there is this thing like very pragmatic is right now only the UK and France have been saying that they are willing to send troops. Other countries like Canada, Australia, Finland have said that they want to be involved in a way, but they're not taking for now position as about sending troops in Ukraine. So the whole situation is still work in progress, but they do feel that there is an urgency to do it before the two countries reach any agreement on ceasefires.
All right, which is why we can probably expect more talks going forward then. All right, Chloe, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Chung at Kangwon National University, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all for today. Do join us again same time tomorrow for a look at the Constitutional Court's ruling on the impeachment of Prime Minister Han Duck-soo. Thank you for watching.